coughing, boils, and 12 herbs and spices. That's right, it's time for the top 10 messed up things that plague doctors had to do. Number 10. The mask. Probably the most interesting thing about the plague doctors is their mask. Why such a weird shape? I always thought it looked like a crow. Crows and ravens share a lot of iconography with dying and sickness and just bad things in general, which always felt like bad marketing to me. Doctors shouldn't look like that. Anyway, the masks actually did serve a purpose, as they were kinda onto something. The bubonic plague was one of the worst sicknesses the world has ever seen, considering the methods of dealing with such were barbaric compared to today. The masks were designed so nothing could get in, and even had glass eye fixtures like a gas mask. More importantly, at the end of the mask was a beak, or so we'll call it, and a little area where you could put nice smelling herbs and aromas to counteract what was probably the worst smells imaginable. A lot of corpses make for a bad smell. To add insult to injury, the mask may have got its design from satirical theater. Oh, what cruel irony. Number 9. 39.5-foot pole. A compliment to the gothic clothing that they wore, and creepy mask of course, the plague doctors also had a cane. And for once in history, it wasn't a beating stick, right? It was a way of poking and prodding patients who were quite ill from a distance. As if your doctors get sick, well then you're in trouble. But the idea here again is to keep your distance from people, as they had figured out that the plague was quite contagious. Did I say the cane was not used to beat people? Yeah, I pulled a sneaky on you. They did. Sometimes they had to use them to ward off crowds of people desperately seeking medical attention. Hordes of people like your least favorite zombie movie. It was a very dangerous job at the time. And as many New Yorkers say, hey, somebody gotta do it. Number 8. The treatments. Surprise, surprise, the treatments for the bubonic plague were not ideal. Well, at least for my tastes. Bloodletting. Someday I'll have to tell you guys the crazy stories that have happened to me and blood. I don't do well with it. I don't know why. You can probably imagine the kind of kid I was. I was a little tank. I used to get cuts, scrapes, bruises all the time. No problem. Blood was the least of my worries and the third most concerning body fluid to find in my clothes. But these days, a drop of blood could have me horizontal on the floor. That's why I say no to bloodletting. Based on the 4 humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and the balance of such liquids. So releasing some of the blood should balance out the equilibrium, right? That's what they thought. I say no. Leave my blood alone. Number 7. The treatments part 2. Well, as if having a man in a very scary mask with a large stick who strongly smells of mint draining you of your precious life juice wasn't the worst part of your day, then perhaps the other offerings he had up his sleeve will ruin your day. Some patients were instructed to pull Bear Grylls and drink the forbidden lemonade. That's pee in case you were wondering. Bumps and boils would be poked and prodded at. Sometimes toads were rubbed all over you. Okay. Lancing the bubbles that form on the skin, because that's what happens with the plague, inducing vomiting and diarrhea, and of course the ye olde tried and true treatment of mercury, because yes, consuming a liquid metal has to cure me of this awfulness, right? I'm sure it won't make me feel worse because it's poison or anything. Number 6. Healers to all. Despite the wealthy doing their best to stay wealthy and not to be poor, avoiding disease in ye olde times was something that they just couldn't dodge. Yes, today the wealthy live better than a lot of people, but the modern average person also lives better than most royalty of the past. Sure, they had access to warm, dry clothes, shelter, better food, hygiene, and a lot of things commoners just didn't. Education for me is the big one there. You gotta learn to read. However, there's still a common denominator, and that's sickness. The plague did not care who or what you are. Still doesn't today. Rich or poor, happy or sad, you can, and if it's the past, most likely will get sick. So the plague doctors had to treat everyone. The statistics of how many people lost their lives to the bubonic plague are staggering. Seriously, look it up, it's a crazy number. Number 5. Data collection. Unlike Facebook and Google and maybe some hackers spying on your data, that's a bad thing. Plague doctors learning about and collecting data was a good thing. Yes, the plague doctors very well could have been coming up with some of the first serious medical documents. At least, well, in a modern sense. What treatments worked? What didn't? Sadly not much. Patients who were healed and cured and others who didn't make it. That list was a lot longer, unfortunately. Despite their unusual treatments, this data collection and trying to zero in on what works and what doesn't was a big part of the job. A job that I know I could never do. Number 4. Outcasts. chances are that your family is made up of folks who work in different industries or professions. You probably got an uncle that has something to do with trucks. Maybe your aunts are nurses. Maybe you got some important family members who work in Washington, D.C. or Ottawa. Ooh, fancy. But my point being, even though they all do different things, or maybe even think differently, you can all come together and be a family, especially over a meal. Love a good meal. Plague doctors did not have this and might have been a little lonely, which is sad because they had a really tough job. But basically, because they spent most of the time with infected patients, more than anyone else really, sometimes even they would get sick. This created a sense of mistrust, as sometimes they could be seen as a source of the infection, or the bad air, as it was so commonly called. When employed, they were told not to socialize with commoners. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's I love people and I want to be around them. Come on, hang out, it'd be great. Number 3, autopsies. Yes, the doctors of the Black Plague also had some autopsies to perform, which honestly, straight up, I can't imagine was a good idea. I mean, the whole no hand washing thing and like the piles of bodies everywhere, it just couldn't be good for everyone's health. So why bother opening any of them up? Just leave them be. Get a fire going maybe, you can deal with it that way, you know what I'm saying? All I'm saying is it ain't no secret why these folks with all the smelly pustules were dropping off. However, in addition to the data collection, this was important as it gave literally almost a limitless supply of practice, experience, to see what makes us tick. Was it a boom in modern medicine? No, not really. But like a lot of medicine and science we understand today, we had to break a few eggs to get our omelet, or in this case, carve out a few chest cavities. Man, the convoy of carriages needed to carry out those bodies must have been crazy. No thanks. Number 2. Pray it away. Plague doctors were doing their best with what they had, and in their defense, that wasn't much. But a lot of times back in the day when people thought things went wrong, it was the wrath of God. I mean, what else could it be, right? And for the people of the time, a lot of things went wrong. There's a flood that destroyed your crops. Must be God. Your wife passed away in childbirth. Had to be God. A sickness that's making lots of real estate go up for sale because of the lack of people due to them not breathing anymore. That has to be God. So people needed to do something to please God and make amends. How about whipping yourself for your sin? Yeah, that's right, that's where we're going with this, and they did it. People were whipping themselves to show just how sorry they were. I mean, hey, at least it wasn't like the Aztecs who maybe took it a little too far. Just walking around flogging yourself all day. Just doing one of the whipping yourself in the back. Number 1, scapegoats. Sadly, in times of great horror and sadness, you'd think people would come together, work towards a common goal. A disease that threatens the very fabric of human civilization. Well, that has to be the work of God, or maybe it's a certain group or groups of people that the church or government doesn't approve of. Yes, that's right, scapegoats, the blame game. While a scapegoat really can be anything, it sadly oftentimes ends up being a group of people who get targeted, simply because it's easier than dealing with the truth. Not cool, guys, not cool. That's gonna wrap it up for me today, guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here at Bumblebee, and if you too wish to humor the 4 humors, then check out my socials linked down below. I've been your host, Big Ched, and stay sweet, my little honeybees. Well, that has to be the work of God. Or maybe it's a certain group or a group. This liquid metal, that's so stupid. Drink liquid metal. Come on now. Come on now. Let's be honest. That's not very good, is that?